Did you request the hot licks?
I did.
Nice.
Heavy metal.
Thank you.
It's actually the theme. It's part of our marketing theme for our robots.
Oh,
Heavy
good.
metal.
We might have some videos.
Exactly. Might name the robot AC/DC.
We can play that for a little bit later. For my first question is, why did it take us so long to get you on stage?
Traffic.
Okay. We've been trying a few years now to get Persona. I'm glad we finally had a chance to get you here in person.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last, so Persona's been, I'd say, operational for about the last 18 months. Formed the company, we're relatively new, although this company is stacked with just enormous titans and veterans in the industry. We started the company in middle of 24 and did a lot of thinking, which is really what helped us derive the go-to-market plan that we're currently embarked on. But we didn't really have a bunch of stuff, right? So the first 6 months we were kind of thinking, investigating with customers, potential clients, investors. What's the tolerance for Me Too? What's the tolerance for strongly differentiated? And then in about January of 2025, we had 5 people. And so although lots of good thought leadership, because I think we have a very contrarian view, I would say, on where we think adoption is going to occur first. But in that quick 18 months till now, we've gone through multiple generations of machines. We actually are going to production right now with our Gen 3 robot. And just had to build out all the infrastructure, raise the money, develop the commercial pipeline, and things are going pretty well.
This is something that's really interesting to me, is it seems like a lot of humanoid companies especially are really emphasizing the speed with which they're building out once they start building, how quickly we're getting it to walk, how quickly we're iterating it. Why is that an important benchmark?
Because you don't know what you're doing at first.
Okay.
I mean, it's really simple.
Yeah.
I mean, although, for example, personally, I've got my start at NASA, spent 15 years there. 10 of those, I was a leader in some of NASA's flagship programs. I've been building humanoids ever since I got out of undergrad. But there's still this enormous iterative component to it. You're not going to be so brash to think that your first prototype's going to be right. So you've got to figure that out as fast as possible. And because knowledge compounds, the learning compounds, and you want to just take that into the next version. Now, the trick is what's good enough, because engineers are going to engineer, and you need to be able to say, okay.
You can over-engineer.
Yeah, you can over-engineer in a hurry, but so that's why establishing good requirements. What are the actual use cases? I think it's why I'm a little bearish on the pursuit initially in the immediate short term of a general purpose system. I think it's too broad. That's why we've narrowed our use cases only from a go-to-market. I mean, obviously, our dream is a general-purpose humanoid as well. But there's a difference between what the dream is and what the approach to get there is. And so that's why we've thought through this from a market dynamic standpoint and feel like the skilled trades, the heavy industrial applications, they've got the right markers for it.
So this is, I think, the thing that a lot of people are having difficulty squaring right now is when we talk about one of, if not the biggest selling point of humanoids is this idea of generalization. Mm-hmm. But right now, all of the pragmatic companies are saying, hey, in order to get to market as quickly as possible, we're going to focus on, 1 or 2 things, figure out how to do those things well, get the flywheel spinning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But can you get to ROI simply doing 1 or 2 things well and not generalizing?
Well, that's why we've really focused on the right unit economics initially. And so good customer profile for us is a client that can take several hundred systems per geographic location. I think that's extremely important. You have to condense maintenance and service. It can't be too spread out. It's why I'm bearish on the home. I mean, you're going to sell one to Hawaii, New York, LA, Michigan, Florida, and I mean, what's that even look like? What's service look like? I mean, I mean, that's just extremely diverse. So our clients have geographic concentration with extreme in-demand skill that is highly compensated, that they cannot hire for, and it allows us to condense. And take a page out of Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 book. Don't be so concerned about the size of your first market. Just go in and dominate it. There's going to be plenty of times to move adjacently. Build your bookstore before you're concerned about selling paper towel, motor oil, and maybe a Russian fighter jet.
Yeah, I guess the question, so when we're talking about market, so like first market, broadly speaking, first market would be like shipbuilding, right? But then you kind of shrink that down. It's like what within shipbuilding, like that's specifically your first market.
Yeah, it is. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
We actually signed a partnership with HD Hyundai, the world's largest shipbuilder, before we'd really even raised money.
Uh-huh.
And just based on the credibility of the founding team and our approach, it really resonated. We had come across this. We want to use tools. We're going after higher value add activities. If you're trying to move a tote, or if you're just simply logistics, those are not the highest compensated activities. But the second you put a tool in your hand, and the second that you're starting to form and fabricate and actually do those activities, you become much more valuable. But unfortunately today, everybody wants to be a YouTuber or an influencer. They don't want to be a high-paying welder. And so we're running a significant deficit of welding. So then you align yourself to a national strategic initiative where industries that are vital to the survival of the world's economy, I mean, all the clothes you're wearing in here likely were shipped across the ocean. So we need ships. And welding is a critical task. It's one of the early, there are 300 kilometers of weld per one of these large ships. You're talking about a 300-meter, 400-meter vessel, 300 kilometers. If you look at production, you're doing about 50 ships a year. That's 14 million linear weld kilometers. That's like welding to the moon and back 40 times. And so this has done a significant amount, and that's just one of an enormous amount of shipbuilders that are all experiencing this pain. So what we thought very strongly was, okay, what market has the right unit economics, the right task complexity, the right environmental complexity, the right purchasing power, the right willingness to adopt, the right task technology feasibility cost? And you run all that together. In fact, we have a slide up here, which is how we view the market. This is actually the subject of my doctoral dissertation. As if I don't have enough to do right now, I'm in school, and I defend next May. But this is a preview of what I'm studying humanoid robotics adoption. And so this is the way we think about the market. What are the real cost pressures? What are the real scarcity of the role? What is the task complexity? What is the environmental complexity? How expensive would it be to develop for that? And when you look at that, the antithesis of this equation is the home. Everybody's home is different. It's chaotic. I don't know about yours, but mine, I got 3 kids running around. It's hard for me to conceive in the immediate short term a humanoid roaming around the house, peanut buttering a jelly, making a sandwich while the 3-year-old's hanging off of its leg and the dog's running by. And, we're trying to be in the presence of that. Obviously.
In the presence of people, in the presence, I know like Jeff mentioned before, like age tech is a big part of what he's interested in, but like another big hurdle there is we're talking about like our most vulnerable people. Like that's another big issue there, these really big, heavy machines around people and babies and dogs and.
That's the visual anecdote that we bring to the equation is we try to figure out how to control for those situations. Although walking around the show here at Automate, there's a lot of robots swinging around in close proximity to people, and I started thinking to myself, well, maybe I'm underestimating or the safety problem. But I just think it's just on another level, right? It's just on another level in the home. But what if you were going into industries that already accepted certain levels of risk? What if you were in industries that have big machines moving around and they already have the cadence, the understanding, and the wherewithal to understand how to be in the presence of these kind of machines? And so we felt that those first markets that already have that environmental consideration could be a good market.
I wonder too, and again, another thing that you and Jeff have in common is that NASA background. They were developing for the NASA humanoid program as well. They have that connection to DARPA. Last time you and I spoke, we spoke about how I think underappreciated DARPA has been the development of the U.S. robotics, just economy system, humanoids, generally speaking. And I'm wondering if part of the reason why you end up looking at something like shipbuilding is this understanding of government grants, government investment. Obviously, there's been a big uptick in robotics companies, 3D printing, automation around shipbuilding, because the current administration has been putting a ton of money into expanding the naval fleet.
Yeah, I think it's important to align yourself on certain undercurrents of motivation. And whether it's Korea, whether it's Japan, Italy, the US, there is a strategic national initiative around certain industries. And so aligning yourself to that could be beneficial. There is some government support for it. Although I've learned that putting the government as your first client can be challenging at times. That's why we're not going direct to the government on certain things. I mean, the US shipbuilding market, it's like 0.2, 0.3% of the global shipbuilding market. So it's all Korea, Japan right now, and obviously China probably holds about 50% of the market share as a country, and with HD Hyundai being the world's largest in Korea. So that's why I'm going to Korea every 6 weeks. I'm getting really used to that flight. It's pretty annoying, but as far as a culture of adoption, I think Korea ranks number 2 with robots deployed per 10,000 people, Singapore being number 1. So you also want to align yourself to industries that are used to pulling in automation. And so that's another reason why we find that the shipbuilding component, although feeling a little narrow, it's still an enormous industry, has all the right markers for a good first market.
As we're on this note of other automation companies, other robotics companies that are dealing in shipbuilding right now, I'm curious to get your take on Path Robotics, on the Rove robot, which is effectively like a spot robot with a welding gun strapped to the back of it.
You should have warned me you were going to ask that. I mean, Path's an awesome company, and Andy's an awesome CEO. So I would trust in the fact that they see the need for that. Our view is there's a lot of additional activities that are involved. The arc on time for a lot of the welders is 10 to 15%, which means that the welder's actually managing a lot of other activities. So they're kind of using a variety of tools. There's a lot of material manipulation while you're doing the weld.
So there is a sense of, it's not generalization exactly, but there is a sense in which like multiple skills are required beyond just the welding itself.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So it's too narrow to say, oh, Persona's building a welding humanoid, right? Yeah. So there's a catalog of activities involved in that process, which we have to expand our skills library, which we're doing. But humanoids, they're not task optimal, right? If you're thinking like, oh, there's this job over here, I wonder if a humanoid can do it, you could probably put another robot in place of that's overfit for that application. Humanoids are set optimal. So when you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a variety, a long tail of applications required to do that job, because when you break down a job into concatenated tasks, and those tasks are driven by behaviors, and those behaviors are driven by skills, once you do that, the humanoid power, the power of the humanoid platform really comes to shine, because that variety of activities to be done is the whole reason. It's the whole esprit de corps, as we would say. So that's what I'm excited about. To build a too narrow purpose, because I get the question, why don't you just put a welding torch on the end of the humanoid arm?
Yeah.
Because there's so many more things that it does. Like it wouldn't do you any good.
I mean, because that is a solution that some people are looking at, is a fixed, like bolted to the ground welding arm.
Yeah, and there's plenty of places for fixed automation welding. In fact, the shipyard's got quite a bit of it. But there's a large amount of welding that's done in confined space, overhead. You got to crawl into areas. And so that's where the power of something that has an anthropometric form and feel. And I think it's really worth pointing out that we're not going to redesign the world's infrastructure for a new archetype of platform. We've invested trillions of dollars into the world's infrastructure. I mean, the crash bar on the exit door was likely designed for like the 80th percentile human being. So if we want to infuse anthropomorphic systems into the world, they're going to start having an anthropometric feel, because we've already designed the world both in form and tooling for people.
So you and your co-founder, Jerry Pratt, have known each other for 20 years.
Yeah, about 20 years. Yeah.
About 20 years. You studied together, you worked together?
Yeah, I met him when I was at NASA, and I'll never forget the day. Jerry is just an exceptional individual, just this incredible brain, and he's always thinking, he's always doing, and it's just, he's so inspiring to be around. And so that, he walks into the lab. The first time I met him is like 2006-07 timeframe, and he's just carrying this piece of paper, this torque speed curve, because he's just so disappointed with the state of electromechanical systems. And he walks up to my desk, and I didn't even know the guy, and he's like, this torque speed curve. He's like, can you do this? And I was like, who are you? And he just carried this, and he would take it out of his pocket. He'd unfold it, and he's like, and he would just talk to random labs or people. It's like, can you design an actuator that can meet these specs? And I stupidly was like, yeah, I think I can. Before I became a chief engineer and a principal investigator.
Why stupidly?
Because it was impossible. What he was asking for is impossible.
Okay, yeah.
And so it's, the human body and all of its glory is a very hard machine to replicate. And so we're always kind of trading. It's a big compromise, right? It's building a humanoid, especially with the intelligence layer now, it's a 10,000-piece puzzle. And you just hope that when you're putting that puzzle together, you don't have a few pieces that are on the ground. And so there's this little gap in your Eiffel Tower that you're making. And so it's an enormous challenge. But Jerry and I have worked together at NASA on and off. And then, we both became available. Our dream had always been to start a humanoids company, but until about 30 seconds ago, it really wasn't the right time. Not a lot's changed on the hardware. You can nibble around the edges with some nuanced technical discussion about some things. Some of the supply chain has gotten better, but it's really it's the compute, its vision is basically a solved problem. It's the intelligence layer, which now when you overlay that on the humanoid platform, now you've got a powerful tool. And so now it becomes, okay, how do we train this to be reliable? How do we manufacture them in quantity? How do we manufacture them at a cost point that the market will accept? And that's where another, I'm just so bearish on the home because it's like, the purchasing power of the everyday person to really scale this out, I just feel we're overestimating it.
Yeah. So it was clear though when the two of you got together and you had that however long period of kind of brainstorming that it was going to be a humanoid company. The issue was just figuring out market fit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In fact, it was one of our first meetings when we said, okay, let's start a new humanoids company, because at the time the world was not short on humanoid companies.
Yeah.
And that's why we took very careful consideration. We looked across the table from each other and said, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to be obsessed with commercialization.
There's a lot of humanoid companies, but nobody's actually like scaling.
Well, I think we also have to have a little bit of consideration for the time it takes to transform.
No, industries. I know, but I'm saying that it's a crowded market even before there's proven success.
I think everyone is still just about standing on the starting line.
Yeah.
It's a wide starting line,
sure.
But we're kind of all still standing on it.
Yeah.
It would, if Persona had started and we were up against companies that had 100,000 robot deployments all over the world, that would be very challenging. But
sure.
At the time we started Persona, they're onesie twosies, still literally today, onesie twosies. No one's really in the tens of thousands, and they're not going to be for a long time. And even if they could produce them at that level, there's no uptake, right? So industries don't just transform overnight. We went from the horse and buggy to the car. It took 15 years to go from horses everywhere to cars everywhere. We're still working on self-driving. The DARPA Grand Challenge 2004-05, Urban Challenge 2007 kicked off the self-driving phenomenon, and there's no mass adoption of it yet, right? So these things take time.
You're still, though, as we alluded to at the beginning, iterating really quickly. So you showed off the first generation. You showed it walking. We can see it on LinkedIn. You mentioned you're already working on the third generation.
Yeah, in fact, so there's a few videos of Gen 1.
Yeah.
Right, we don't have a name yet. Maybe we'll name it AC/DC, but we don't have a name yet for the robot. So we got a handful of platforms, Gen 1. We got Gen 2, here's a video. No one's ever seen the robot walking around yet or doing its thing.
Somebody might fall on a play button backstage.
Yeah, somebody could fall on a play button backstage. But so this is Gen 2. This is kind of basically first ever. You guys are getting to see it first. So what we used the Gen 1 for was to set up all the training infrastructure. How are we going to develop the walking, the stability? How are we going to start training the manipulation? But then Gen 2 was like, okay, let's industrialize it. This is an IP65 rated platform. It can work out in the rain. It can work out. It's robust to FOD, foreign object debris, dust. And so you can imagine this thing getting into the harder industries, right? The dirt, the grime, the heat. These are things that we deeply considered when we built this platform. This is not an indoor robot. And so it's a robot meant for super tough work. I'd like to call it the toughest robot in the world. Jerry always cautions me to use, absolute superlatives. So it's a very tough robot.
Sure.
And so we're really proud of Gen 2. Now we've got Gen 3s already in manufacturing, and we're building 20 Gen 3 systems. And so a company that literally went from 5 to 90 people in 18 months, developed the customer pipeline, raised the money, did the first multiple generations of machine. To your point earlier, is speed, right? And so I think developing a process of iteration, developing a process of figuring out the right answer. We don't have the right answer, but what you have to have is a process to find the right answer.
So does Gen 1 exist so that Gen 2 exists, so that Gen 3 exists? Are you actually like deploying this in any form? Are you using this to actually go out and like collect physical data?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so we have, the Gen 1s are data collecting machines. We supplement that with cameras we've installed on workers. We have a great partnership with the state of Louisiana. We've outfitted fabrication facilities with instrumentation to collect data.
Louisiana's where like the giant shipyard is. Yeah.
Yeah. The state of Louisiana and the Gulf Coast more broadly is a good fabrication shipbuilding community. It's not exactly Korea, but it's good. It's good for the U.S. So we've gone into these areas. We're collecting data from workers. We use the robots to collect data. Obviously, we do a lot in simulation, of course. And so it's a crescendo, right? You aggregate all these components together. And what's amazing about it, when we brought Gen 2 online, we took everything we had learned from Gen 1, just dropped it on Gen 2. And then when that happened, it took us an afternoon to get it up and stable. And I said, wow, this is actually going to be possible because the compounding nature that you're not throwing away everything. In old traditional robotics, you build a new robot, just throw everything away. If you want to do something new, it would take a legion of programmers 6 months to add a feature, and then it wouldn't work for 3 more months.
This is the promise of physical AI.
This is exactly the promise of physical AI. We are teaching machines how to do things now. We're not programming them. We've programmed the environment to which they learn, in which we deploy policies to the robot, but we are absolutely teaching them to do stuff.
How much of a challenge is outdoors?
It rains. It's not 72 degrees and no wind and a pristine environment. So, which I think there's place for a lot of different morphologies of humanoid platforms in them. But for us, I've put robots in space. I put them 2 miles underwater. I felt like we could build out the engineering prowess to handle the vagaries of the environment and heavy industry. So we chose that because we didn't see a lot of people going into it. Houston is where we're located. It's the world's, it's energy capital of the world. So we have great partnerships with energy infrastructure, super majors. It's a market that no one really talks about. Turns out it might be where all the money's at. So, but it's hard, right? These are hard things, and we were up for the challenge, and so that's why we picked it.
So it's somewhere below outer space.
Yeah. Well, it's underwater, then outer space. Underwater is much harder than outer space.
Great. So we got about 5 minutes left. I think we might have time for a couple questions. I've got Robert back in the room. Raise your hand if you have any questions for Nick.
Got my first victim right here.
Hey, thanks for your time. You mentioned the starting line is very wide, and there could be a scenario where some of the entrants get off the starting line and then they stop. Could you talk us from a client side how we should think about partnering with some companies or being adopters, but having that risk of not everyone's going to be long lasting?
Yeah, that's an excellent observation. In the field, we call it pilot purgatory. It is the way some companies are operating, it's like you give the client a free option. You're like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to try your task out. You develop a partnership, you publicize it, but there's really no skin in the game from the client side. So our challenge is to ensure that the client is really bought in, that they've got skin in the game, that if there are success and very clear success metrics, that there's a next step. That's some things that I'm bringing to the equation. I mean, first-time founders are kind of like, they'll talk to you all day long about the technology. I think multi-time founders, it's all about how you bringing it to market. What's the client? What's the business model? I mean, how are we going to do this? I mean, the technology, yeah, sure, we got a team over there for it. I'm more interested in how this thing's going to get sold. And the clients today, you know, there's a little bit of this free option where you got to ensure that the client is really bought in, and that's why I love some of the partners that we have. And so it's, you know, there's a big socialization to this. You know, you got to go into many touch points of the organization. You know, there can be some top down, there's got to be some bottom up. You got to get into the middle management. Everybody's got to be aligned, because let's be, you know, clear about this. There's some controversial aspects to this. I mean, when you know, you can just Google, you'll see some of the union reactions to what's going on, and we have to be open and honest about that. You know, it's, yeah, I think some clients are going to get off the starting line, and I think there's going to be an abrupt halt. And that's why I think it's really important who you pick as a client and pick as a market. You know, one of the dimensions of that equation that's not up there, but it's the willingness to adopt by the partner. They have to have the purchasing power, but also the willingness to adopt.
Michelle, you have somebody in the back.
Hi, Jeff Lipton, BG. I have a question about scaling. Motors, you know, there's a major price point in the systems is the motors. They don't seem to be getting much cheaper. We produce a lot of them. Is there a belief that that's really going to get much cheaper with scale? And the other one is motors go with R cubed, right? Their torque grows as you make them bigger. How are you going to get the power density you need into the hands for these to have the type of dexterity we expect from a human-like system?
Well, on your cost point, I think that's why it's extremely important that the markets you're going into, the positions that are desired to be filled are well compensated. And so then you have to work with the investors that are supporting the company on what's an acceptable payback at the unit level. And so from what I'm seeing and today's prices of electric motors, and a lot of it's driven by the materials, right? The magnet materials, the rare earth materials, the neodymium iron boron, the samarium cobalt. These are extremely, well, they're rare earth. They're not exactly rare, but they're expensive. You know, that's a big cost driver in the motors, the copper and the windings, obviously. So that's why it is crucial. It is absolutely crucial that the market you're going into has some viability, has some durable business model that's going to allow an acceptable ROI. That's the first point. That's not why I'm bullish on the home or even warehousing. For, you know, we're not trying to displace $15 an hour fulfillment jobs. So that's in my opinion extremely important. Now on the technical side, one of the companies that I started was an electric machine company. My graduate work is in electric machine optimization, so I know a little bit about machines. And so yes, we are going to hit and are hitting basically an upper bound on what these electric motors can provide. But from what we've seen, it's adequate. For example, in the markets that we're going into, the OSHA requirements for lift, for all these sorts of things, provide an incredible framework on what the robot should be able to do. And if you compare the OSHA standards for human activity and what the requirements, and we derive requirements from that to the machines, we're able to hit those things. And so if it's good enough for OSHA, it's good enough for the robot. And so with the current technologies, we're good.
I think we're almost out of time. Brian, you want to close this out?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. Nick, thank you so much for joining us.
Brian, it was awesome. It's incredible to be here at Automate 2026. It's been fascinating looking at all the incredible players out there. It's just an incredible time to be in the industry, and the next 5 years are going to be at least entertaining.
Great. When can we accept a look at Gen 3?
You have a standing invite to come see it anytime, but you know, this late summer, early fall, it's going to be pretty cool.
Pretty soon. All right.
Pretty soon.
Nick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.